Hey there, welcome to another Slightly Rednecked video. This is going to be another quail update video, but it's really going to be more answering some of my viewer questions. I've had some great questions I figured everybody could benefit from on things ranging from the lighting I'm using to how the birds keep from flying out of the hutches, to how I'm going to winterize them, how old they live before I need to get them out of the flock, those kinds of things. So without talking about that too much more, I'm going to get right into the meat of this. I'm going to get those questions answered for you. All right, so the first question comes from a viewer by the name of Micah Wotring. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, Micah. Micah's a viewer that I've had quite a bit of interaction with. We've talked back and forth several times. Real nice guy. He's got his own blog, so I'll put a link in his blog down below. He's 15 years old. He's trying to start his own farm someday. He's got dreams of that, and right now it looks like he's raising mostly ducks and chickens and some turkeys and some of those kinds of things. So follow his blog. You can keep up with what he's doing. I think he'll do some great things. So let me get right into his question though. All right, so he starts off by saying, so I do have a couple of questions. Number one, would it maybe be better to have the light go on in the morning so that they get their extra light then instead of in the evenings? I have read about how chickens can't find their way to where they want to sleep because it suddenly goes dark, and it's better to let the light fade in the evenings. Not sure if that applies to quail too. Number two, have you had any problems with the quail flying out or trying to when you open the door? I noticed that you have the door on the side of the pen and also that it hinges down. I have several wire wood hutches that have doors on the top or sides, but I'm scared the quail will fly out. When the door is on the side, would it be better to hinge on the bottom or side of the door? And then number three was pretty much just a suggestion for video quality, what he'd like to see in my videos, maybe how some editing suggestions. And thank you very much for those editing suggestions. Clearly I'm not the best video editor out there, so I'm always open to suggestions on how to improve my video quality. If you have graphics that you think, suggestions, whatever, I'm always open to those kinds of suggestions, and I do appreciate it. All right, let's start off by what he's referring to by the light fading is the solar light that I've got on top of the cage here. You can see it, I kind of talked about it in my previous video, and here it is right here. It's just a solar shed light from Harbor Freight. I need to get some video, and maybe I'll do that on this, of how it works at night. It comes on automatically when the sun goes down, and then it stays on for several hours. Now, two things about that, Micah. First of all, great suggestion on that, and I can understand why your concern is on that. With the lights just go out suddenly, they're just stuck where they are and they can't see. Two things about that. One, these are quail, they don't really roost like chickens do, so it's not as big of a factor with them because they pretty much just stop moving anywhere in the cage, even when the light just fades. They just happen to, wherever they're hanging out, that's where they sleep. They don't look for a roosting spot or anything like that. Secondly, this light does tend to kind of fade out in the night. It doesn't just go out like that. When the battery starts dying, it just fades, it gets dimmer, it gets dimmer, it gets dimmer, it gets dimmer, and then eventually it goes out. So it works that way. Ideally, I would like to have it come on in the mornings, a couple hours before sunrise, and provide the extra light then. But it's a solar light, and I don't have any kind of way to put a timer on it. If I ever run electricity out here and put lights in these, then I definitely will put them on a timer. I'll have them come on early in the morning because I do think that that's a better option for them. So great suggestion on that. Second part of your question about whether or not I have problems with the quail flying out, honestly, not really. I did have some problems the first couple of days. When I first put them in here, it was a little bit tricky to keep an eye on them and make sure they didn't fly out. They just kind of freaked out a little bit and panicked a little bit whenever I opened the cage door. But now they're completely used to it, and you can see they're all walking around. Hopefully you can see that on film. Whenever I open this up, you'll see what happens here. They pretty much don't come near the front of the cage. They're hanging out at the back. Now, sometimes they get all riled up, and if they're moving around, I got to keep an eye on them, but for the most part, I have not had any problems with these quail flying out of the cage. They seem to think it's home and not have to, not want to leave it. So hopefully that answers the second part of your cage, or your question, but as far as where it's better to put the doors, it's really about your convenience. Whatever is easier for you. I didn't put them on the side because I didn't want to be opening big long doors on the side. It just seems like it would be in the way if I wanted to get into both sides of the hutch at the same time. I like them to just drop down. You can hinge them at the top, but then I need to put something to hold them up whenever I open them up. To me, it's just most convenient to hinge them on the bottom so I can open it up and just let the door hang there and not have to worry about it. So that's the only reason I chose that configuration. But again, do whatever works best for you. Okay, the second question comes from a viewer, actually second and third question comes from a viewer that we've heard from before. Comes from Michael Broussard. Make sure I get that name right again, I'm terrible with names. And he asked me a couple of questions during a little bit of conversation. So these are his questions. Hey, Slightly Redneck, I have noticed in a few videos that you spoke about your quail getting older. How long do you keep a quail before egg production starts to go down and you have to harvest them? And then the second question he says is, Slightly Rednecked, one more thing. Like I said before, I have 8 birds, 6 females and 2 males. I currently am saving eggs and will begin incubating around next Tuesday. Let's say I have a good hatch rate and replace my current 8 birds with 8 of the hatchlings. Let's say I do this every time I hatch birds. Is there any fear of inbreeding? Will the birds begin to be deformed or anything over time? I know in rabbits that you have 3 generations before you begin pushing it. Do you know how it works with the quail? First one about the age of the quail. You know, I really don't think about it too much. From all my research, everything I've looked into, you could expect to get about 2 years probably average out of a quail with good egg laying. They actually can live much longer than that, but if you're pushing the egg laying, then you're looking at about 2 years where you're going to get good egg laying out of them, maybe 3 if you're lucky. I tend to kind of replace my birds about every year because I've got new birds hatching out, and I just keep the bigger birds and I call out the smaller birds and replace them. I notice that they do tend to produce really, really well for about the first year, and then they do seem to kind of start getting a little bit patchy after that, but there's several things that could cause that. So the second part of your question about inbreeding, that's a really good thing to think about. I personally have not had any problems with inbreeding. I keep a nice mix of males and females. I've got my birds originally from different bloodlines. So, you know, when they're breeding and they're producing eggs, there's no way to really tell which one's which. There's a good mix of the genetics in there. And a little bit of line breeding is a good thing in your flock. Now, with that being said, I also do trade birds with people occasionally, and I probably do that about once a year. I'll get some eggs from a different source, I'll get some birds from a different source, and just introduce some new genetics into my flock to keep from having any of those problems. Okay, the next question comes from a viewer by the name of Captain Jack. What he says is, what state do you live in? I just really want to know, will you leave them out during the winter, and what do you do about water? I had lots of people ask questions about the winter. My plan is to leave them in these cages during the winter. From everything I've looked at, from my experience with rabbits and other animals, they seem to do just fine in the winter. Oh, and to answer your question, I'm in southwest Missouri. I'm in zone 6, I think it's 6B actually. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. Not severely harsh winters, but we do get lots of freezing weather, and water is going to be a big concern for me. That's the only major concern. What I do plan on doing with the hutch is probably covering these sides, the side and the back, with maybe feed sacks or a tarp to provide them a little bit more extra wind block. But theoretically, if I give them enough wind block, and I'll put some straw in the section over there that's blocked up, so that'll give them something to kind of get out of the weather in there. And if I do that, then they should be just fine through the winter. What I'm going to have to do with water at this point, I don't have another solution because I don't have power run out here, is that I'm just going to bring out water a couple of times a day. I'll bring it out in the morning in some large dishes. They'll drink their fill of it, and then again in the evening they'll be able to drink their fill of that too. I do that with the rabbits, and it works out great with the rabbits so far. So I'm going to try that with the quail. Stick around. We'll see how it works. All right, the next question comes from a viewer by the name of Our Monkeys Are Circus. And he's got a YouTube channel. I'll put a link in that below that you can go check out. It's just a family vlogging channel. Lots of fun videos on there, interaction with his kids and those kinds of things. So it's worth going over and checking out his channel as well. But he asks, I need to find where I can get quail here in Arizona. This is a great idea. Lots of people have chickens here. We have wild quail running around the property here. Definitely need to research this idea. So obviously it's a new idea to him. I get this question all the time from viewers. Where can I get quail? Where can I get quail? You can always order eggs. There's several online breeders that sell eggs. If you want eggs directly from me, contact me. I'll see what I can do to get eggs for you. I'm not really in the business of selling eggs, but I don't mind sharing a little bit. But really, the best place to look is probably just Craigslist. You'd be surprised when you start searching for things like Coturnix quail or Japanese quail on Craigslist, how many people in your area probably have those. So look there first. If you don't find anything on there, you might check local poultry swaps. They usually will have somebody there that's selling quail, and that's a great place to start. You can start with birds instead of eggs, so you have a little bit more success right there, and you tend to get a lot better deal that way because you're not paying shipping. So it just tends to work out a little bit better. So that's where I would start. This tip comes to us from a viewer by the name of David DeVries, or DeVries. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right. Hopefully I got it right. Just a heads up, Home Depot sells a wire cutter. It's like a pair of bolt cutters for $9. I also build cages and use heavier wire mesh, and these cutters cut the wire like a hot knife through butter. Love the PVC setup. Got to look at adding coasters for easy movement. Thanks for the video. What a great tip. Thanks for sharing that. That is always the biggest pain whenever you're cutting wires. You have to cut them with little bitty wire cutters, and with heavy gauge wire that can, especially if you have problems with your hands, arthritis, any of those kinds of things. I know my hands ache after trying to cut wire. So those bigger, bulkier cutters for $9, what a great deal. What a great tip to share. I'll put a link for that product below so you can see that. You can order it right through that link and go pick it up probably for free at your local Home Depot store. All right, that's it. That's about it for the viewer question section of this video. As far as the update section of this video goes, not much has changed. These guys have been outside for a week or two. Absolutely loving this setup so far. It's working great. The automatic waterer back here keeps them watered. This thing lasts. This 5-gallon bucket waters this hutch and the other one. And I've got, I don't know, about 25 birds probably between the two hutches. And it lasts for about a week and a half before I have to put water in this thing. So it's working out great. Planning an incubation video was going to come out this week, and I had a catastrophic loss in the incubator for the second time in a row trying to get this video filmed. I think what I've got is a bacterial issue. I had some birds start hatching, everything looked great, and then everything died all of a sudden. So it kind of points to a bacterial issue. I got to thinking back when I had the other problem with the incubator, and I think I learned a lesson here that I'll share with you guys. I don't think I cleaned my incubator out real well before I set these eggs. I had eggs in it before. The incubator failed, the temperature sensor went out. I dumped those eggs out, and I'm not so sure I cleaned it out before I placed the new eggs in it. Now, nothing had hatched, so it wasn't filthy from that standpoint, but there obviously was some bacteria in there. So I'm going to clean my incubator out real good. I'm saving up some eggs right now. I'll get them set in the next day or two. So another 20 days, and hopefully I'll have a incubation video out. So I hate that this has taken so long, but I didn't want to... I want to make sure that this is a good video that's actually going to help you guys out before I get that posted. Well, that's about it for this quail update. So thanks again for viewing. Please interact below. Let me know your thoughts on the setup. Let me know your thoughts on what things you're doing. Give me some questions or some topics that you'd like to see covered in the next quail update video. I'm going to start trying to get these things out every Monday, so you can expect to see an update video come out every Monday. If you get me your questions in on the bottom of this thread right here, it'll make it much easier for me to keep track of them, and then I'll try to get those answered in the next video. So thanks again for watching. Please, I think it's probably over here, hit the subscribe button below to make sure you keep up with the content. It's also starting to cool off a little bit here, so expect some rabbit updates to be coming pretty quick. Let me know your questions for those as well. And as always, God bless.